So the debate will be in English, just because we have someone who doesn't speak Portuguese. If you don't understand English, I would strongly recommend to maybe pull someone who can maybe live translate for you for the whole debate. So we're going to start with a debate, and then I will make sure I can pass a microphone to the other side so that we can also have some questions. So think about the questions, gather the questions, and by the end of the debate, which will probably be around like 40 minutes, then we'll have some of the questions of your side. So my name is Ricardo Esteves Ribeiro. I'm a journalist at Fumaça, an independent media project which is covering human rights with time to think and investigate. We've been also covering a lot the issue of refugees and the issue of the politics of the European Union and the member states of the European Union towards this particular problem. And today I have with me Michele Cinque, the director of Iuventa, the documentary we just watched. He's also the director of Jululu and Sicily Jazz, the world's first man in jazz. Welcome. Juan Branco, a human rights lawyer holding a PhD in international law by the École Normale Supérieure, is responsible together with Omar Schatz for a petition to the International Criminal Court to investigate the European Union and member states officials for crimes against humanity in the Mediterranean Sea and Libya, and is also, and correct me if you're not anymore, but you were also a member of the Julian Assange legal defense team, you still are, and a legal advisor to WikiLeaks. And Miguel Duarte, PhD student in theoretical physics at Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon, a crew member of Iuventa, having done multiple rescue missions at the Mediterranean Sea. He also worked as a volunteer in refugee camps in Greece and Turkey, and is a founding member of the Humans Before Borders, the collective that is organizing this debate. Welcome. So, Michele, I want to start with you. You start the documentary by saying, and I quote, "By the time I found out about it in early summer of 2016, the Iuventa was already on its way from Germany to Malta, the starting point of its first mission in the central Mediterranean. At that point, it was clear to me that this story had to be told. Why did you decide you would be the one telling this story?"
First of all, I want to thank you, and it was a great emotion to be here with Miguel, and we have met on the dock of the Iuventa, the starting of 2017 missions, and I'm really thanking you and all the collective for the great work you are doing here in this country, and all of you for supporting their work and this fight, which is very much needed to support solidarity in Europe. So, thank you for the question. I think every documentarist, every filmmaker somehow has to be in love with the story he's going to tell. Or there is a long process. It's something that really you need love to tell the story, to go through all the process of doing an independent documentary. So at that point, I read this news. It was late, actually, to jump on board of the Iuventa, but I realized that these guys, these 20-year-old people from Germany and from other countries of Europe, had something that my generation have lost, which was the hope and the courage and the strength to fight for a better world, to fight for something they believe in, and to be the one to be on the front line. So this was for me something completely revolutionary, to find these young guys that wasn't lost in this powerless that seem to be everywhere in Europe. And I'm a little bit older than them, so I really got this eureka moment. I said, this is the story I want to tell. This is something that, you know, that on board the Iuventa jumped a lot of people with different skills. There was medical people, there was people that knew how to manage and to drive a boat, or and maritime people. And my skill was
PhD students of theoretical physics.
Of theoretical physics. And everything in between, I would say. And my skills was as a filmmaker. So I jumped with my skill because I really believed these guys had something that could inspire other people. And this is happening, actually. It's happening today, and I'm really happy.
But the story was very different when you started, right? So you weren't expecting to do this documentary that you were showing today.
You know, when you start a documentary like this is an observational documentary. We never had the screenplay, and you never know where the story will take you. You have to always be like ready to improvise and to be for this film we shot over 500 hours of footage in 1 year and a half. So it was really a complete rush for 1 year and a half around Europe, following these guys. I would expect that at some point they would crash with reality, because you know they started this mission and especially at the beginning with a lot of naivety of saying, okay, we can actually change the political equilibrium of Europe. But then I never would expect that they would be persecuted, and the film would be so much needed at the end, because when the Iuventa stopped and was taken by the Italian authorities, the film became much more political than it was at the beginning, much more needed for public debates and to tell what is really happening in the Mediterranean Sea, because the narration today, doing honest and direct narration, is something that has become truly political. To have a camera with no hidden idea, with no idea of creating political consensus, is something today that has become quite revolutionary, I would say. Our work as independent media people, and is something, especially in my country. I mean, in Italy, it's the narration on the Mediterranean Sea. What happened was completely fake, completely. So the film grow with and I said at the end of the film that I thought I would stop to shoot at the beginning of 2017 because I had too much material, and I thought that they already had eaten reality. But then arrived the Lampedusa and the taking of the ship by the authorities.
I want to go exactly to that very moment, on the 2nd of August 2017, Miguel. The vessel Iuventa was seized by the Italian authorities and remains out of the Mediterranean to this day. How did you find out about the seizure of the vessel?
Queria só, já que vou começar agora a falar, queria só primeiro agradecer em português a todas as pessoas que aqui estão, agradecer muitíssimo ao Monumental por nos ter dado esta oportunidade, por ser mais uma plataforma para nós podermos comunicar esta situação, e mesmo agradecer-vos do fundo do coração por estarem aqui. Traz-me lágrimas aos olhos ver tanta gente aqui e dá-me esperança. How did I know about the seizure of the Iuventa? So I had done already 4 missions on board the Iuventa in late 2016 and early 2017. By July, I finished my 4th mission, and I came home to Portugal to see my brother get married. And I was my plans were just going to go back to the sea. That was really the only thing I wanted to do, my first and only priority. And I was 2 or 3 days from going back to Malta to join another 2 missions. That was the end of July. I really just wanted to be there, and even between missions, I was planning on staying in Malta as well. I had already packed, but I got a call from the head of the mission that I was going to join on the 3rd or 4th of August, and he told me that the situation was going on. Most of the people who were there didn't speak Italian, so they even sent me some official documents and some stuff in Italian, so that I could
because you
tell
do
them,
speak Italian.
Yeah, I was more or less. I mean, I was in Portugal, and I was more or less the translator there, even for the. I mean, you can imagine the surprise of all these people who were there. Suddenly suddenly there were 50 policemen searching the ship for firearms, while we're just humanitarian aid workers, right? And so it didn't make any sense, and the language was not understood. So it was very, very difficult to understand. It completely surprised everyone.
Less than a year later, investigations by the Italian judiciary started against you and 9 other members of the Iuventa crew. Why are you being investigated for a crime that can put you in prison for 20 years?
Why are we being investigated? I would say for a very specific political purpose. We've all seen the rise, unfortunately, of a xenophobic, at times racist narrative in several countries in Europe, with special focus in Italy, sadly.
Although this was before the government that now is being led by, for example, Salvini as one of the representatives.
Yeah, but it would.
The investigation started well before the elections that led Salvini into power.
Yeah. This government can be called anti-immigration, but we shouldn't run the risk of thinking that the other one was pro-migration, right? All these problems started, I mean, for the Iuventa at least, all these problems started way before there were elections. So even the government from Matteo Renzi was very unwelcoming in many respects.
Were you expecting this investigation? If you actually follow the chronology of the investigation and the judiciary, at least the one that they are mentioning, the investigation inside the vessel was actually being for Iuventa and Jugendrettet, the NGO that was holding the vessel, was actually being done, well, for a year before you actually before that, the vessel was actually seized. Did you know this was happening? Did you suspect that this was happening before?
We had no idea whatsoever. I mean, we knew that we had a lot of unsympathy from a lot of people, and that could amount to some problems in the future. But I don't think anybody ever imagined that. Basically upholding international law and saving people, which was exactly what we were doing, could ever bring us to legal problems. And it came as a complete surprise on the 2nd of August, as you saw in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever suspect, Michele, while you were inside Iuventa?
From the spring 2017, we had a huge change in the climate, in the political climate. As I was a little bit outside, I didn't have the same perspective as the activist. And I would say that we really witnessed the change of how these people were seen by the public opinion. So from day one, when I started filming, they were seen as heroes. They also won some prizes in Germany for social, actions and youth heroism. And then in spring 2017, with the Interior Ministry of the Gentiloni government, we really starting to smell that there was something big going on. But we never could think that because this investigation started with 2 undercover agents on board the Vosestia, which was another search and rescue vessel active in the Mediterranean Sea in that period, and these 2 guys.
Well, phone calls were also being monitored, for example.
Yeah, and are also under accusations. But these 2 undercover agents were linked with La Lega di Salvini and with the identitarian generation, this pan-European far-right movement. So it was an investigation that started with a political will to find something wrong in the NGO's work.
Juan Branco, what do you feel like it's the goal of this investigation? Is the aim of the Italian judiciary to put these people behind bars?
There is the clear objective is to criminalize NGOs in order to make the implementation of the migratory policy of the EU successful, in the sense that success for them is to avoid any crossings in the Mediterranean at any cost. So there's been 2 periods of time in this policy. The first one, which was the end of Mare Nostrum, which was a search and rescue operation, and its transition to Triton, which was a repressive operation. So they reduced willingly the scope of search and rescue because, and this is interesting, there had been a judgment from the European Court of Human Rights, which was called Hearsay judgment, which forbid any transportation of people you had saved back to an unsafe port. So basically you couldn't send back people to Libya if you had saved them. So in order to abide to this legal decision, instead of keeping on saving people, the EU leaders decided to withdraw and let them drown, and expecting that if they would die, this would push the others not to try to cross because they would see the risk was too important. But then something happened that they hadn't planned, which was the emergence of these NGOs, which started saving people they had stopped saving. So this put this strategy in jeopardy. It blocked it from being successful, basically. So then they switched to the second step, which was to externalize their migratory policy to Libya, to cooperate with the so-called Libyan Coast Guards, which is just a consortium of militias who commit all kinds of crimes and who are funded by our money in order to avoid people to try to cross. And if they have to kill, to torture, to do that, they will do it, and they do it in a daily basis. And even to that, to gain even more money, they create a circular system in which they have their own detention camps, in which they handle with traffickers, which are sometimes working both for the Libyan Coast Guards and for themselves, and they create this system in which they push to the sea people, then they intercept and take them back, and so forth. So NGOs, they were just avoiding, you were making this policy a failure, basically, and so you criminalize them in order to make sure that at no cost someone will cross the Mediterranean, at any cost, sorry,
But you don't feel like the goal is to put these people behind bars, No,
it's just to avoid for them to interfere into this policy and avoid people keep on being tortured in Libya and so forth. So, it's intimidation, pure intimidation, but if you feel at some point that you need to put someone behind bars in order to intimidate the others, they will do it. So it doesn't mean that there is no real risk. On the contrary, it just means that they will just adapt according to the NGO's response, basically, and they will push further into the repression if NGOs try to keep on saving people. And we don't know where the end is, because there is a huge political gain in following this policy. You get a lot of votes to that. I have my interpretation on that. All this comes back from me from the 2008 economic crisis, and you needed scapegoats for that because you hadn't sanctioned any of the people who had provoked them, whether politicians or bankers and so forth. And so you always go to the minority, the weakest people in the society, in order to find a diversion for the violence that has been nourishing into your society. So you, instead of having this violence going against politicians, you just find a new scapegoat, someone that will receive it, someone who's defenseless, so who will have to be submitted to this violence. So that was migrants. And you add to that, of course, the Libyan war in 2011, which revealed something important, which was that we had externalized our migratory policy for more than 15 years under Gaddafi rules. And Gaddafi had created all these camps of detention that would avoid migrants to cross the Mediterranean, but it was out of our scope. We wouldn't see it. And the war made it visible and destroyed the system in which people were already tortured, who suffered extremely harsh conditions. And suddenly we saw that this phenomenon was existent and we didn't know how to react. But I mean the leaders, and therefore they started committing what we have qualified, this policy we have qualified it as a systematic and widespread attack against the civilian population, and that's a crime against humanity. That's what defines a crime against humanity.
We'll be talking about that also. Since 2016, more than a dozen legal actions were initiated by member states of the European Union against rescue NGOs or its activists. Doctors Without Borders, for example, stopped its rescue operations after the seizure for more than 2 months of its boat Aquarius, responsible for the rescue of more than 30,000 people. Proactivo Open Arms was also stopped by the Spanish authorities this year. Sea-Watch, and also a vessel seized by the Maltese government. And last month, Carola Rackete, its captain, was detained and put into house arrest for a few days. She was set free on Tuesday by the Italian judiciary. More than 10 different NGOs and multiple vessels worked in the Mediterranean Sea for the past 3 or 4 years. But during the past couple of months, only CI and Sea-Watch were rescuing people there. Do you also agree with Juan Branco that the goal was to stop the rescue of the Mediterranean, and stopping these NGOs and stopping activists from rescuing refugees? I mean, the goal of the investigation, of your investigation, and all of those that I listed.
It's really the only plausible goal that I can think of, because I mean, if we take a closer look at the investigations, the details of all this and how this happened, it's so clearly preposterous, ridiculous, that there's no way that it's aimed, that this is an initiative that's aimed at making us respect the law. Like it's not an attempt to enforce the law. It's an attempt to achieve a very specific political goal. So I think that has been the strategy implemented by the Italian authorities, but not only. This is quite a widespread tendency in many countries in Europe. We've been seeing what happens in Spain, for example. All the Spanish civil rescue ships have been stopped from rescuing in Greece as well. Similar actions have happened from the Greek authorities. So this is quite a widespread tendency with that very specific political goal. Yeah.
September last year, a United Nations report called Desperate Journeys showed that although the number of people arriving in Europe and crossing the Mediterranean significantly dropped, the cross became deadlier than ever. Quoting the UN's press release, the report shows that while the total number of people arriving in Europe has fallen, the rate of deaths has risen sharply, particularly for those crossing via Mediterranean Sea. In the Central Med, one person died or went missing for every 18 people who crossed to Europe between January and July 2018, compared to one death for every 42 people who crossed in the same period the year before, 2017. Juan, on the 3rd of June, you and Omer Schatz put forward a legal case before the International Criminal Court. You were talking about that just now, asking the court to investigate European Union and EU member states officials for crimes against humanity in the Mediterranean Sea and in Libya. Talk about this.
Yeah, it's a 250-page investigation that we started 3 years ago. We were helped by students of Sciences Po on that, which aimed at systematizing the analysis of what happened and show that all this, I mean, for the public sphere, all this too often appears as a drama or a succession of tragedies, which are the fruit of powerlessness, in the sense that we cannot do anything about it, no? There is all these people who are dying and we cannot save them. Sometimes we manage to save some, but it's a drama. What we show, it is the result of a political will, and that the decisions that were taken of criminalizing NGOs, of withdrawing of Mare Nostrum and further, were taken in knowledge that it would trigger a huge increase in deaths. We have internal notes from Frontex, which is the European agency in charge of these issues, and internal documents from EU chancelleries that show that they knew in advance that many people would die out of their decisions. But it was politically too helpful for them to do so, even though it would trigger the deaths of thousands. So they triggered the death of more than 14,000 people in our calculations, very conservative, because this is a criminal case. What we are aiming at is to put people in jail, basically. So we're doing what they do.
Can you explain what the International Criminal Court is and its significance? So what is the significance of calling for an investigation of crimes against humanity?
So it's a criminal court at the international level. 123 countries signed the Rome Statute, and it has competent jurisdiction over crimes, war crimes and crimes against humanity, and there is no immunities against them. You can be president of a state and you still can go to jail if they decide so. So it's a very powerful court in theory, but very weak and coward in reality, because it doesn't dare attacking the powerful people. But what we are trying
very few people were ever
and only Africans, so it's kind of course a neo-colonial perspective that we're used to. But what we're trying to push, it's like push the contradictions of the institution and say, okay, you're capable of investigating a small militian in the forest of Ituri because he triggered the death of 30 people. Are you capable of prosecuting the guy you're taking cocktails with every week in Brussels and The Hague, Rome and Berlin because he triggered the death of 14,000 people? And we're waiting to see if they will be capable of that or not. So I worked at the International Criminal Court in the office of the prosecutor that receives this submission. So we did this legal work very precisely in order to make sure they would have no legal excuse not to investigate. There will be only a political reason. If they decide, I'm not saying not to prosecute or to judge or to condemn, just to open an investigation. It's already crazy that they didn't do so. The European Commission, in a reaction to a complaint, admitted mistakes. They said it was not intentional. But what this statement means is that they were implicated in this case, in the death of 14,000 people. So when you have the main suspect of a case that admits its implication in the death of 14,000 people, the minimum you can do as a criminal institution is to open the investigation, to make sure that they did trigger these deaths unwillingly, which is of course a bit weird to think of, but maybe it's true. Maybe they just let 14,000 people to die because of a lack of chance, by mistake. Okay, why not? But the minimum they can do is to go to Paris, Berlin, Rome, Brussels, to go into the archives and to look if actually, as they claim, it was a mistake, or as we claim, it was the fruit of a willingly applied policy, of which one of the methods was criminalizing NGOs in order to make sure that this policy would be a success. And you said there's been this drop in arrivals in the European Union, but a huge rise in terms of mortality. This is a success for these people. They managed at all costs to avoid this arrival of people. So even if it triggered thousands of deaths, it's good.
I mean, you, on the press release sent to the media on the day that you initiated the legal case, it stated, and I quote, EU decision makers consciously caused the deaths of thousands with the intent of deter humanitarian crossing. Yeah. This is very strong language.
Yeah, and it took us 3 years to get to that conclusion, and even for ourselves to accept that it was like that it was I mean, it's very weird to think like that, but when you realize, you accumulate the evidence, you realize that it actually happened in that sense, it's really difficult not to act, actually. And again, we see the cynicism of these people in this case. Their bet is that no one will care about these people, because these people are invisible. They have another color that most of the people in the European continent. They die in the middle of the sea where there are no cameras. They are tortured and put into camps in Libya where there is no press in the midst of a civil war. So their bet is that we will never give them enough attention so that they will have to pay back the price of their crimes. And what we try to do at our level is to say, no, be careful, because whether the public opinion will revert or not, we are looking at it, and you might go to prison for having done that, basically.
Miguel.
No, I think just what you're saying, that one of the goals was also to take out all the eyes from the Mediterranean Sea when they started pointing the finger to the NGOs and criminalizing the volunteers, the captains, and seizing the ships. There was a clear goal to take out independent witness and eyes from the Mediterranean Sea. So we couldn't see more people dying. We couldn't be sure that a boat wasn't rescued and 80 people died, as happened 3 days ago. So I think
666 people already died. I mean, the people that were counted already this year.
Yeah, I was just saying there was a missing boat 2 days ago with 80 people that arrived in Zardis, the dead bodies of 80 people, and so it's and nobody could see or could rescue that small dinghy.
So it becomes again a tragedy. So they managed to put it back to this narrative in which it's a situation you cannot do anything for, because it's so sad, no? 80 people died, but voila,
and it's numbers. Again, it's just numbers.
Because you don't see them.
Yeah, you don't know their names, you don't know who they are, their dreams, their fears, and so I think it's all, on my point, narrations in a judicial court or in a movie theater or in the newspaper are really important, because they are putting us in this close look on this subject with this politics of numbers, and we shall break that wall and see the people behind the numbers, and this is what volunteers are doing there, and they pay a huge price for doing that. I mean, every volunteer that I've met in the last 3 years had at some point a nervous breakdown, or it was very hard to come back to their reality. It's not an easy job to go there and to do the job of Europe, let's say.
Miguel, do you also think that these thousands of deaths were consciously caused by the EU decision makers?
Yeah, I think I do. To actually predict the magnitude of the human catastrophe that is still taking place, I don't think the policymakers had that in mind specifically, because the amount of people that actually try to cross and the amount of people that actually manage to cross depends on so many variables. The very practical things like availability of boats, for example, of material, of gas, the political or military situation in Libya that's changing from day to day. So it changes from that. What I think happened is that there was a complete disregard for the safety of these people. It was more like they knew that thousands of people could die, and they still pressed on with these actions, right? With these policies and these attempts to criminalize the only bits and pieces of the European Union, of civil society, that actually tried to organize and to do something about it, right? Because it's really, as they were saying in the movie, it was Europe, it was the European member states that created in the first place the Operation Mare Nostrum in 2013 that rescued over 150,000 people, right? It was the states that decided to do that to give a more or less adequate response to the hundreds of deaths that were taking place before there was any rescue, right? Then after 1 year, in 2014, they stopped this operation. They substituted for a border control operation, and people keep dying, as was quite predictable. Like, you don't need to have access to confidential information to know that it's really predictable. If a rescue operation rescued 150,000 people, if you stop it, then thousands of people will die, right? And yeah, that's where the NGOs came in, and as Juan was saying, that was probably the unexpected part.
Yeah. Well, this March, I've interviewed Thomas Bossec, a special representative of the Secretary General on Migration and Refugees at the Council of Europe. As they put it, the continent's leading human rights organization, the Council of Europe. We talked about the reinforcement of the powers of the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, Frontex, so the police of the external borders of the EU. This was a regulation passed in October of 2016, which gave more power and more budget to the agency, including the power of deporting people to the countries that they were fleeing from. They call it returns. Actually, the word returns or returning are written 284 times in this regulation passed in October 2016. And I asked Thomas Bossec, who is responsible for refugees and migrants at the Council of Europe, I asked him, isn't this sending refugees back to the death that they are fleeing from? This is his answer. David? Só bocadinho.
Well, I'm sure that the mandate is not a such that they just send them back. They have to process everyone, and if there is a request for asylum, they have to assess their vulnerability, and if they can be sent back to the country, there is no danger for their life, or they could be treated inhumanly there. But
I mean, Libya. Do you feel like Libya is a country where there's no danger to life?
I think Libya, we cannot consider Libya as a safe country. Yes, I think it's sure.
So isn't that against the rules of the European Union, really? Like sending a refugee or sending someone back to a country where it's not safe for them to be?
Each and every case has to be examined individually, and if after this examination they come to the end that this country is for this individual, for this particular case, not safe, then they cannot be sent back. I think the answer is there.
And do you believe that was always the case with Frontex?
I really don't know. I don't know. I don't have data. I don't have enough information of individual cases.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But isn't the role of the council, you were saying, making sure that this in Europe or in the member states of the council is being respected, that those rights are being respected?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you know?
This is the role of the Council of Europe, that our member states they don't violate the standards that we have, and this is what I said.
Do you? Olá, David. Olá. Juan, Do you believe that Thomas Bosek is indeed unaware of the results of this policy?
I mean, everyone that is working on the subject knows of the consequences of the policy. Maybe the public doesn't know enough because the information is very biased. The way this information gets to the public is passes through a lot of filters, especially of reification, of the humanization of these people, which is always part of the strategy of political violence. You have to first reduce the humanity of your victims in order to make sure there will not be sufficient resistance from the society to the fact you will be violent against them. This is a key process in all violence, mass violence processes. It's a key element, and it has happened, of course, with migrants, and it is why even the term of migrants instead of exiles or whatever has been implemented in Europe, and why the debates have been so violent over the subject. The idea was really to repress any capacity of empathy towards them. And yes, the EU strategy has been to avoid any contact with these migrants, basically just to make sure they would not be legally responsible for them. But this avoidance policy is per se criminal because these people were under their responsibility. And for example, the Libyan coast guards to which we're externalizing our migration policy are actually funded and instructed by us. So they're just acting as proxies to us, and all the crimes they are committing, which are horrible. I mean, we have in our demand, for example, a cable from German ambassador to Niger, which was sent directly to Angela Merkel 3 days before she had to negotiate an agreement with the government of Libya. And in this urgent cable, the German diplomat said, I visited camps of detention in Libya, and these are concentration-like conditions of detention, concentration camp-like. So my friend Omer Schatz, whose family has been deported to concentration camps during the Second World War, he always says, these guys are Germans, so they know what they're talking about when they're talking about concentration camps. I wouldn't allow myself this joke, but there is consciousness everywhere. There is consciousness to the point that they willingly created all these very elaborate strategies to avoid legal responsibility for their criminal acts.
Now that we're talking about Frontex, Michele, I just realized your T-shirt talks about that. Can you show us and talk about why you're wearing that?
This is one of the T-shirts that was made by one of the Iuventa 10. It says, ferries, not Frontex. And it was a T-shirt that was often on board. There is also a poster that I filmed in the Malta base camp that was of the Jugendrettet camp there, and so it was a symbol of the NGO when or a certain kind of movement that was active at sea at the period when let's say the cooperation with the authorities in 2017 became harsh. I would say before, for example, the seizure of Iuventa, there was a mission it was in Easter 2017 when the Iuventa had to launch a May Day in a night with the sea was 8 in the level of, it was a huge danger for the 400 people on board, and this May Day was completely ignored by the...
May Day, the call for emergency, right?
Yeah, the call for emergency, because Iuventa wasn't able to move with all that people with that rush sea, and there wasn't cooperation, neither from the Italian Center of Coordination, neither from all the ships of Frontex that were nearby. So yeah, it was this. Of course, it's provocative, but it's when the mission Triton started, when Frontex became the policy of the migratory policies of Europe and not Mare Nostrum like, that this kind of message came out.
Last question before we pass to the audience. Exactly a month ago, the collective hub, Humans Before Borders, that you are part of, Miguel, which is organizing this debate, started a crowdfunding campaign with the goal of raising funds and awareness to your legal battle against the Italian judiciary. The campaign raised to this day, and there's still 6 more days to go, more than 53,000 euros, and almost 3,000 people contributed and donated to the cause. Multiple political representatives, including members of parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Augusto Santos Silva, and even the President, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, either talked to you or talked about the case publicly. What do you call them to do now?
I think a lot has been done already for us and for this case and for solidarity in general, or for this fight against the criminalization of solidarity. Just the fact that we have state institutions stating their support publicly to us is of great help. It's a really good thing in the end, and I think it will give nice results by the time all this is coming to an end. Because as we look at it as a political, all this investigation as a political initiative or politically motivated initiative, we have to think of it politically. So we have to know that the public statements of political figures about it are very relevant.
But is that enough?
Absolutely not. That was my second point. So why is this happening now? Why is there so much outrage on the public outrage from public institutions, from state institutions, and all that? It's because we're European volunteers. We are risking at the moment 20 years in prison, and that's horrible, given that we were there to save lives. But we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that for the past years have been suffering the worst human rights violations we can think of, and we have several thousands of people that have died trying to search for a dignified life, let's say. So when you ask, is it enough to support our fight against the criminalization of solidarity? No, that's actually the bare minimum that's expected from a European state. I think we have to expect and we have to demand more from the state institutions. We have to demand that they uphold human rights and that they defend the human rights defenders, but also that they actively contribute to a more humane policy, border policy in Europe.
So we're now open to questions. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I would probably recommend to maybe listen to a question, then an answer, and then a question, and then an answer. We have time, so please, raise your arm. Also, if you want to make the question in Portuguese, that's also okay. I can try to translate.
Ok. Queria apenas relembrar que a nossa responsabilidade como individual é um mar. Aliás, desde a antiga Grécia, já em Homero, se dizia que o mar é o pai de todos. Estou a fazer uma peça de teatro sobre isso já agora. Só para dizer que o que se passou na Grécia, na ilha de Lesbos, o que se passou nas margens, e estou a relembrar o que se passou na ilha de Lesbos, foi que a população inteira de uma ilha pôs praticamente ao serviço dos refugiados, alimentou-os, fê-los sobreviver, lutou por eles, ao lado deles, e depois a grande tragédia, nem sei qual é a palavra, foi eles voltarem para a Turquia, em condições de escravatura ainda piores que eles tiveram. Estou-me a lembrar do que se passou em Atenas, os campos de concentração de Atenas, que recebiam 700 euros por cada pessoa que recolhessem e tratassem, e os campos de concentração eram tão maus, as condições eram tão péssimas, as pessoas estavam com temperaturas de 40 graus, que eles se revoltaram, muitos foram mortos, e tiveram uma população inteira ao longo de 2 anos. Eu segui como tradutora essas situações, por isso sei do que estou a falar. Houve greves de fome massivas de imigrantes, estou-me a lembrar em 2011, na Grécia, de centenas de pessoas que fizeram essas greves. Estou-me a lembrar das minas que os próprios gregos puseram nas margens do rio Ebro, minas para matar as pessoas que fugiam do Iraque, que iam refugiados de guerra. Estou-me a lembrar de muita coisa dessas. Estou-me a lembrar, essencialmente, do que os refugiados, que são refugiados climáticos já. Estou-me a lembrar do que se passou na Síria. Se estivermos atentos ao que se passou na Síria e o que antecedeu o que se passou na Síria, sabemos que já são efeitos das questões climáticas, não é? Portanto, Portugal, em 2021, vai ter o dobro da área marítima. Vamos ter fronteiras muito mais abrangentes e vamos ter uma responsabilidade muito grande. Se calhar vamos todos como piratas para o mar para recolher os refugiados que vêm aí, que vão ser muitos, muitos mesmo, de todo o lado. Era só isso que gostava que o Miguel, em particular, comentasse isto. Obrigada.
I mean, I'm not sure I can translate the whole thing, but she was talking about the dire conditions of refugees, particularly in Greece, and talk also about what's going to happen now in Portugal, also with climate refugees and all of that.
Posso responder em inglês? Está bem. Bom, não sei exatamente que partes é que me sinto à vontade para comentar, mas eu tive entre missões de resgate no Mediterrâneo, passei muito tempo nos campos de refugiados da Grécia e da Turquia e, portanto, pude ver também, pelos meus próprios olhos, mesmo a diferença de condições entre um sítio e outro. Tive cerca de 2 meses nos campos de Lesbos com a plataforma de apoio aos refugiados e existem vários campos de refugiados com muita gente na ilha de Lesbos, sendo que o pior e por isso mais conhecido é o chamado campo de Mória, em que na altura em que eu lá estava viviam cerca de 5.000 pessoas em condições absolutamente horrorosas. A ilha de Lesbos durante o inverno tem neve e as pessoas viviam em tendas de verão no meio do asfalto, de tal maneira que... E víamos vídeos a chegar a todos os cantos da Europa acerca disto, não é? Via-se as tendas no campo de Mória a colapsar sob o peso da neve, não é? Pessoas que não tinham sequer um agasalho, houve gente a morrer de hipotermia. Dito isto, as condições dos campos na Grécia parecem um hotel de luxo em comparação com as condições dos campos que vi no oeste da Turquia. Muito por causa da atitude do Estado turco em relação à ajuda humanitária, nomeadamente providenciada por organizações internacionais. A esmagadora maioria dos refugiados e dos migrantes que estão nos campos não oficiais no oeste da Turquia não têm acesso às coisas mais básicas. E também pela atitude do governo turco em relação aos mídias, nomeadamente aos mídias internacionais, não existe nenhuma atenção sobre isto, não é? Portanto, aliás, o que me levou a ir à Turquia, em parte, até foi precisamente a falta de informação que havia na Europa em relação às condições que se vivia na Turquia. Sabíamos dos números oficiais que havia, penso eu na altura, se calhar uns 3 milhões de refugiados sírios na Turquia, que é infinitamente mais do que havia em qualquer país da Europa. Mas não chegava informação sobre as condições em que as pessoas viviam, não é? Houve um acordo assinado com a Turquia em março de 2016 que fechou, para todos os efeitos, a rota dos Balcãs. As pessoas deixaram de conseguir passar Portanto, ficaram, as pessoas, quer dizer, não deixaram de sair dos países de origem, portanto, ficaram, aquilo que podemos concluir é que ficaram retidas na Turquia. Sabíamos também que a Europa, com este acordo, teve que pagar 6 mil milhões de euros à Turquia para lidar lidar, entre aspas, com os refugiados e os migrantes que iam chegando.
Apesar do acordo não ter sido votado no Parlamento Europeu e não poder ser responsabilizada a Europa pelo acordo, por não ser um acordo da Europa, mas dos diferentes Estados-membros.
Exatamente. Pronto, pronto, é estranhíssimo e é, aliás, sintomático de um problema muito maior a falta de informação que temos. Quer dizer, se nós pagamos 6 mil milhões de euros de dinheiro dos contribuintes europeus para tratar, para cuidar destes refugiados, então onde é que está a informação sobre a maneira como estas pessoas estão a ser tratadas? Onde é que está a informação sobre como é que esse dinheiro foi gasto? Quer dizer, é mais um sintoma desta ideia da externalização das fronteiras que temos visto a Europa fazer, não é? Ou seja, despejamos dinheiro para lá, despejamos apoio a estes Estados, e não Estados, como é o caso da Líbia, para que estes governos cuidassem das pessoas, mas para que as mantivessem fora das fronteiras europeias, só isso.
Próxima pergunta.
Hello, thank you for your courage and your work. I had a related question for Juan Branco, basically about Turkey and the attitude of European Union with Turkey. Do you think it's the same? It's the same way that Europe is basically paying Libya or paying Turkey to hide the problem to us, to common media, and keep it outside, don't mention it? And yeah, what do you think of this relationship with Turkey?
It's the exactly same strategy. The difference is that Turkey is more able to maintain it efficiently than Libya, basically. So it's better hidden than what happens in Libya, and maybe less crimes committed also. I mean, it's more of a lower violence, no? A more silent violence, but more constant also. So yeah, it's the same. One thing I hadn't said in my last answer is that Angela Merkel, after having been told that these camps in Libya were concentration camp-like, she still signed the agreement 3 days later with the Libyan government. So yes, I cannot. I mean, we could go into details into the difference between Turkey, but it's the three main roads, which is Eastern, Western, Central Mediterranean roads, have been treated in similar ways by the EU, and they've tried to import actually the Turkish model into Libya without taking into account the huge difference, which was that Libya had no state and was just a civil war-torn territory, and that therefore they couldn't retain people there without triggering mass death and mass violence.
Hi, you did an excellent job. My question is, can't Juventud ask the help of very human beings like Guterres and the Pope in the Vatican? Because, I mean, it's human rights. My father was director of UNRWA in the Middle East, and he covered Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Gaza Strip. It was the Palestinian refugees. So I've grown up with this, and I understand the whole problem, and I'm for the refugees, 100%. Why don't you face the issue with important human beings like Antonio Guterres and the Pope? That's it.
The Pope has spoken about it lately with very strong words, but his political power today for the worse and the better maybe is limited. So, and Guterres, it's the same. He has, as a general secretary, he has power of organization of the UN and of its agencies, but he cannot wait in the states to make them change the policy directly. He can only influence them, and I don't know if he has been trying to do that. Actually, I have been.
Any other question?
I have two questions. So first, it seems that the root of the problem is the instability and the civil war and the military coups in Turkey and Libya. And so obviously saving lives in the sea is a moral imperative. But aside from that, what do you think the EU should be doing in terms of acting in those countries? It seems like injecting money is not good enough because it will probably fall in the wrong hands. And so I would like to hear your views on that. And also to Miguel, you said previously that there was hostility on the part of the authorities in Italy and in all those countries. What about the civilians? What about their reaction to your presence in those countries?
As an answer to the first question, I think the first question doesn't have one simple, specific answer. I think it has. So, if we are looking for a long-term solution, we cannot be thinking, as was in the movie. Actually, search and rescue organizations don't claim to be a solution for this problem, right? At most, we are just an emergency response that is completely insufficient because while it's necessary, while this work is necessary, it's not applicable long-term because the ideal situation would be that people don't have to run this risk, that sea rescue is not necessary, right? So that people don't have to put themselves in such a risky situation to find asylum, for example. Many things could be done for this, as there is no simple answer to such a global problem. I mean, there are a lot of simple things that could be done. If we look at the majority of the armed conflicts around the world, who are the greatest arms exporters in the world? It's the United States and European countries, right? So we could start by not selling weapons to authoritarian regimes. That would be one way to decrease the need for forced migration. Another way to tackle this problem would be to have humanitarian channels so that people wouldn't have to be in European soil to ask for asylum in Europe, right? We could have systems in place for asylum in embassies, for example, or UN organizations that could implement this. So I don't know. There are many things that could be done that are not being done, not because not because policymakers haven't thought about this, because this is not new ideas. This is just the lack of political will to do something about it. The second question, I think probably, speaking about Italy, I think Michele is probably a better person to answer this because we did not work in Italy. We worked in international waters and our base camp was in Malta. So in practice, we went to Italy maybe 3 or 4 times in the whole year that we were working. And that was only to the port of Lampedusa when we were actually forced to do so. So as an organization, we were not very much in contact with the Italian public, only what we got through the media, right?
So I didn't get the point on Italy.
Basically, what's the response of the? I think that's what you were asking, right? What's the response of the public in Italy to our presence, to our work?
I think in Italy it's very divided. It's completely polarized. There is, or they are the NGOs and the volunteers are seen as heroes, or they are seen as criminals. There is not a middle way narrative that tells you what is really going on. And as Miguel was saying, this was an emergency solution by the civil society that never thought to represent the solution of this problem. There is always a feeling when you go back from a mission, when you in the time that it was possible, of powerless. On one time you saved maybe 2,000 people in one mission, so you feel an enormous joy, but on the other way you feel really powerless to this huge mechanism, and today even more because they are playing with these NGOs to create a political consensus. Iuventa was the first case, but now we are seeing this every day repeating in Italy, and seems that the only problem we have is these hundreds of people or thousands of people that are trying to reach our country. And for example, nobody speaks of how many Italians go abroad because there is no work, or it's or how the economy is really going in a huge depression. So it's really, to me, politics is using this subject to take out our attention to bigger problem and issues, and to create an enemy, very simple enemy. And in Italy, they made it, I would say. But on the other hand, we are touring Italy every week and seeing people that are crying after the film, like thanking us to bring honest narration and help them to understand what is really happening with these people that are now criminalized. And I think it's even more now these ships are trying to save our idea of Europe. When they ask me about Iuventa, I always say it's not a film on migration. It's a film on how we want to create Europe, how young Europeans want to deal with the future of Europe. And I think these ships are rescuing also ourselves.
Let me just ask a question also to Juan on this topic, since we're talking about what needs or should be done. This week, the European Parliament had its first session after the last elections of May. As we're starting this mandate, do you feel optimistic that a few of the things few of the refugee packages that have been discussing, well, for the last mandate, the whole mandate, will be put in place? For example, changing or reforming the Dublin Convention, allowing for the distribution of refugees for the whole continent, for example, allowing people to call for the asylum while they're in the countries of origin. Do you feel optimistic about this parliament?
I don't know. What I'm sure of is that what we did it thinking that if these people feel the pressure that they might go to jail someday for what they're doing, they will start looking at the problem differently, not only in how to earn political gains by using these populations as scapegoats and to just apply violence on them and therefore get retribution, politically speaking, but also, okay, what are the limits? We shouldn't go further, because otherwise we will get like serious trouble, and it's not about getting elected and having a comfortable life, but about spending a few years or a few dozens of years in jail. So we're playing this card, and we're actually being received by the European Parliament Wednesday. So just after the opening of the new session. So we're really going to play on the institutional card. We're going to the Bundestag, to the Spanish Parliament, and so forth, in order to put pressure on these people, because now these people are curious about what could happen to themselves. I mean, the overall strategy of NGOs until now, in terms of legal strategy, was to go to the European Court of Human Rights and so forth, but this doesn't trigger personal consequences for politicians. In the worst case, you get condemned as a state, but you never get personally threatened in your liberty, in your freedom, in your capacity to do whatever you want. So what we want to now is to create this fear and reverse the violence they're applying to people, like the NGO members that are now being threatened in general, not only you. But so the idea is really to play with their cards, and now we're trying to bring all the NGOs to follow this path, and they don't dare still, for a simple reason. Part of them depend financially, but also symbolically, from the support they can get and the access they can get to these politicians, to the state's apparatus. So they never dared going to an actual criminal case against them. And we were just too two lawyers with no, I mean, we had no institutionalized support or anything, so we could go just where our conscience told us to go. And I just want to say a few, like very quickly, a thing about the reception by, I mean, the subject is very violent, and you receive a huge violence, especially in social networks when you mobilize yourself in these issues. You get a lot of hatred, especially in Italy. I mean, I don't know if I suggest you follow Salvini on Facebook just to see the posts he makes literally every day on the subject and how people react to that and the violence that keeps on fueling. And one of the way we found not to be exposed to this violence that much, at least in France, was our engagement with the Yellow Jackets, which is this social movement which is completely despised by the elites, which is fighting basically for social rights and more equality, etc. And suddenly, if you find yourself both from the side of the proletarians of your country and from the migrants, there is something weird that happens, and it's no longer like them against the migrants, no? Like they don't feel like that migrants are going to take their bread and put them into even worse situation, and this is all an elite organized system in which they bring in foreign people in order to reduce wages and stuff. And suddenly they ask themselves, but why someone who has been with us, who has been defending us for months against the whole establishment, suddenly also takes this position? We thought this was like contradictory, and this has protected us a lot. And we've seen that, I mean, these are, but why do I say that? Because we really need, like all of us who are engaged in these issues, we really need to take into account the social question in our countries, because it is because of the social situation that the violence against migrants exists. I mean, politicians use migrants as scapegoats in order to avoid their responsibility in the social consequences of the crisis they have triggered. So we have to intertwine both, and if we don't, we will always be cornerized by all these fascist or extreme right people who will say, you see, like they're cosmopolitan, horrible people who just live in this superior, like this world that we are not into, and that they don't care about the consequences of their pseudo-humanitarian work. So I think it's essential, and I think the left, the social democratic left in Europe for the last 30 or 40 years completely forgot that you had to combine both, basically.
Tínhamos uma pergunta aqui embaixo.
Obrigado. Bem, antes de mais, queria felicitar o HuBB pela organização deste evento. Acho importantíssimo, acho que tem estado a correr super bem e é de felicitar. A minha pergunta pode eventualmente ser um bocado ingênua, mas quer dizer, é fácil nós associarmos tudo isto que temos estado a falar, pensando que do lado da Europa há um discurso xenófobo, racista, e enfim, de extrema-direita. Nós vemos-lo na Europa, mas a Europa não é isso apenas, ou seja, nem os governos europeus são isso apenas. Penso que todos temos essa consciência e, portanto, não obstante, todos voltam as costas ao problema quando surgem, enfim, notícias eventualmente mais que se notam mais, que aparecem mais na imprensa, todos voltam as costas a isso. Eu queria perceber um bocadinho o que é que está a acontecer, quer dizer, do ponto de vista, não do ponto de vista dos partidos ou dos governos que alinham por esta narrativa xenófoba, mas do ponto de vista de todos os outros que constituem a Europa, que não têm a mesma narrativa. Somos, obviamente, penso eu, de uma forma honesta, levados a acreditar que não a têm, porque na realidade não a partilham, mas obviamente conhecem o problema, obviamente conhecem o que é que está a acontecer, obviamente sabem que são responsáveis por soluções diferentes do que aquelas que estão encontradas e que aqui falámos relativamente à Turquia e relativamente à Líbia. No entanto, viram as costas. A minha questão é, eu peço desculpa de não estar a falar em inglês, mas para mim é mais fácil em português. A minha questão é, como é que isto se entende? Quer dizer, se há uma explicação para isto, para mim não está fácil de entender. Ou seja, se pensarmos que estes governos que não têm esta narrativa, na realidade, o problema deles de ter uma narrativa diferente é correr o risco de que os populistas, os ditos populistas, cresçam dentro dos seus próprios países e, de alguma forma, tomem uma preponderância em termos de poder, como vimos em Itália e como vimos noutros países na Europa, mas na realidade está-se a ver que essa estratégia não funciona, porque esse discurso xenófobo continua a crescer e provavelmente cresce mais por não haver uma solução, por as pessoas assustam-se porque não há soluções, não encontram soluções na Europa. Quer dizer, a Europa não traz soluções que se entendam. E, portanto, a pergunta é simplesmente esta, quer dizer, como é que isto se entende?
Yeah.
Ok? Obrigado.
So we have... Perfect. So we need to basically finish, so I'll ask you for like a succinct comment on this. And who wants to answer?
I can answer as
an Italian.
Not only, but also as someone that deals with narration and deals with in the last year I've been meeting a lot of people. I had the chance to meet with the film a lot of people from all over Europe and especially in Italy, and I would say that the narrative, it's important because they are putting us on one side or another side, on the side of populism or in the side, as Juan was saying before, like we need to see that social issues are connected to migratory issues, and climate change issues are connected to social injustice of this political system. It's all connected in my way of seeing, and I would say that what we can do is create different narrations, because it's all about communication today. It's a world that over-communicates on social media. Like our Minister of Interior, Salvini, is only communicating by social media. He never gives an interview. So they are the ones that understood the power of social media before, I would say, and also what is happening in different countries of the world to me testify the same, like Bolsonaro in Brazil or the era of Trump. I would say they are using social media in a very smart and profitable way. And I think we shall create a different narration and unite. I mean, what I'm you know, moved by what is happening here in Portugal with this young, you know, volunteer and physics, and that what has moved just only him and the collective and the people behind him, and you know, this movement of young people. And look what 10 guys of the Iuventa have moved. And so I think we shall take action. This is we shall go out of this powerlessness that they put on our shoulder as something that is done. You know, we are actors. We are not. We have something to do and something to say. So let's do it and let's say it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Muito obrigado. Juan Branco, Michele Cinque e Miguel Duarte.
Muito obrigado.